The Log of Roaring Camp by Bret Harte. There was commotion in Roaring Camp. It could not have been a fight, for in 1850 that was not naval enough to have called together the entire settlement. The ditches and claims were not only deserted, but Toodle's grocery had contributed its members, who, it will be remembered, calmly continued their game the day that French Pete and Kanaka Joe shot each other to death over the bar in front room. The whole camp was collected before a rude cabin on the outer edge of the clearing. Conversation was carried on in a low tone, but the name of a woman was frequently repeated. It was a name familiar enough in the camp: Cherokee Sal. Perhaps the less said of her the better. She was, of course, and it is to be fair, a very sinful woman, but at that time she was the only woman in Roaring Camp, and was just then lying in sore extremity when she most needed the ministration of her own sex. Dissolute, abandoned, and irreclaimable, she was yet suffering a martyrdom hard enough to bear, even when veiled by sympathizing womanhood, but now terrible in her loneliness. The primal curse had come to her in that original isolation which must have made the punishment of the first transgression so dreadful. It was perhaps part of the expiation of her sin that, at a moment when she most lacked her sex's intuitive tenderness and care, she met only the half contemptuous faces of her masculine associates. Yet a few of the spectators were, I think, touched by her sufferings. Sandy Timpton thought it was a rough on Sal, and in the contemplation of her condition, for a moment superior to the fact that he had an ace and two bowers in his sleeve. It will be seen also that the situation was novel. Deaths were by no means uncommon in Roaring Camp, but a bird was a near thing. People had been dismissed from the camp effectively, finally, and with no possibility of return, but this was the first time that anybody had been introduced ab initio, hence the excitement. "You go in there, Stumpy," said a prominent citizen known as Kentuck, addressing one of the longers. "Go in there and see what you can do. You've had experience in them things." Perhaps there was a fineness in the selection. Stumpy, in other clans, had been the putative head of two families. In fact, it was owing to some legal informality in these proceedings that Rottingham, a city of refuge, was indebted to his company. The Crown approved the choice, and Stumpy was wise enough to bow to the majority. The door closed on the extempore surgeon and midwife, and Roaring Camp sat down outside, smoked its pipe, and awaited the issue. The assemblage numbered about 100 men. One or two of these were actually fugitives from justice. Some were criminal, and all were reckless. Physically, they exhibited no indication of their past lives and character. The greatest scamp had a ruffled face, with a profusion of blond hair, Oakhursts, and gambler, had the melancholy air and intellectual abstraction of Hamlet. The coolest and most courageous man was scarcely over 5 feet in height, with a soft voice and an embarrassed, timid manner. The term "roughs" applied to them was a distinction rather than a definition. Perhaps in the minor details of fingers, toes, ears, etc., the camp might have been deficient, but these slight omissions did not detract from their aggregate force. The strongest man had but 3 fingers on his right hand. The best shot had but one eye. Such was the physical aspect of the men that were dispersed around the cabin. The camp lay in a triangular valley between two hills and a river. The only outlet was a steep trail over the summit of a hill that faced the cabin, now illuminated by the rising moon. The suffering woman might have seen it from the rude bunk wherein she lay, seen it winding like a silver thread until it was lost in the stars above. A fire of withered pine boughs added sociability to the gathering. By degrees the natural levity of a rotting camp returned. Bets were fully offered and taken regarding the result. 3 to 5 that Sal would get through with it, even that the child would survive, side bets as to the sex and complexion of the coming stranger. In the midst of an excited discussion, an exclamation came from those nearest the door, and the camp stopped to listen. Above the swaying and moaning of the pines, the swift rush of the river and the crackling of the fire rose a sharp, querulous cry, a cry unlike anything heard before in the camp. The pines stopped moaning, the river ceased to rush, and the fire to crackle. It seemed as if nature had stopped to listen too. The camp rose to its feet as one man. It was proposed to explode a barrel of gunpowder, but in consideration of the situation of the mother, better counsels prevailed, and only a few revolvers were discharged. For whether owing to the rude surgery of the camp, or some other reason, Cherokee's heart was sinking fast. Within an hour she had climbed, as it were, that rugged road that led to the stars, and so passed out of Roaring Camp, its sin and shame, forever. I do not think that the announcement disturbed them much, except in a speculation as to the fate of the child. "Can he live now?" was asked of Stumpy. The answer was doubtful. The only other being of Cherokee's sex and maternal condition in the settlement was an ass. There was some conjecture as to fitness, but the experiment was tried. It was less problematical than the ancient treatment of the Romulus and Remus, and apparently as successful. When these details were completed, which exhausted another hour, the door was opened, and the anxious crowd of men, who had already formed themselves into a queue, entered in single file, beside a low bunk or shelf, on which the figure of the mother was starkly outlined below the blankets, stood a pine table. On this a candle-box was placed, and within it, enwrapped in staring red flannel, lay the last arrival at Roaring Camp. Beside the candle-box was placed a hat. Its use was soon indicated. "Gentlemen," said Stumpy, with a singular mixture of authority and ex officio complacency, "gentlemen will please pass in at the front door, round the table and out at the back door. Them as wishes to contribute anything toward the orphan will find a hat handy." The first man entered with his hat on. He uncovered, however, as he looked about him, and so unconsciously set an example to the next. In such communities good and bad actions are catching. As the procession filed in, comments were audible, criticisms addressed perhaps rather to Stumpy in the character of showman, Is that him? Mighty small specimen. Hasn't more'n got the color, ain't bigger nor a drinker. The contributions were as characteristic: a silver tobacco box, a double and navy revolver, silver mounted, a golden specimen, a very beautiful embroidered lady's handkerchief, a diamond breastpin, a ring, a slingshot, a Bible, a golden spur, a silver tin spot, a pair of sergeant's shears, a lancer, and a Bank of England note of £5, and 200 in loose gold and silver coin. It was 4 o'clock before the camp sought repose. A light burned in the cabin where the watchers sat, for Stumpy did not go to bed that night, nor did Kentuck. He drank quite freely, and related with great gusto his experience, invariably ending with characteristic condemnation of the newcomer. It seemed to relieve him of any unjust implication of sentiment, and Kentuck had the weaknesses of the nobler sex. When everybody else had gone to bed, he walked down to the river and whistled reflectingly. Then he walked up the gulch, past the cabin, still whistling with demonstrative unconcern. At a large redwood tree he paused and retraced his steps, and again past the cabin. Halfway down to the river's bank he again paused, and then returned and knocked at the door. It was opened by Stumpy. "How was it?" said Kentuck, looking past Stumpy toward the candle box. "All serene," replied Stumpy. "Anything up?" "Nothing." There was a pause, an embarrassing one, Stumpy still holding the door. Then Kentuck had recourse to his finger, which he held up to Stumpy. "Wrestle with it. The little cause," he said, and retired.
The next day, they buried Cherokee Saul in Roaring Camp, then discussed what to do with their son, and Tipton proposed to send the child to Red Dog. Stumpy and Ginny decided to take care of the child. He grew up well because of nature surrounding that Stumpy believed. When he turned 1 month, they decided to give him a name, but none of them liked it. But because the baby had brought luck to Roaring Camp, they decided to choose that name, ignoring allusions to his mother or father. On the day of the baptism, they had prepared a ceremony, but as a burlesque imitation of the religious ceremony. But before the baby was deposited before an altar round, Stumpy stopped the ceremony and explained that a baptism would be carried out seriously, something that was strange in that camp. So Tommy Locke was baptized as in a Christian church. A change in the camp began. The treatment of Tommy was incredibly pleasant, but as the time went on, Stumpy began to protect Locke more to an exaggerated point.
Regeneration is a major theme of the story. In the beginning, the camp is poor and unsuccessful. The town's only woman is a prostitute. She gives birth but does not survive. Things look dreary and unpromising for the new infant. The men step up, however, and the infant survives. He thrives against all the odds, and this has a profound change on the men of the camp. They begin to take pride in their appearance and surroundings and wish to make things better for the young boy. This newfound prosperity causes them to make plans to improve the town even further. They talk about building a hotel, of having people visit. Even the most destitute minors began to take pride in their appearance and work to change the look of the camp. The miners' struggle with nature is ever present in the story. At the time Hardy wrote the story, a common theme in literature was the harsh, unforgiving spirit of nature, and how man in the face of it cannot do much besides wait out her fury. At the beginning of the story, the camp is suffering immensely. Luke's beard seems to herald a change in their luck, but this is short-lived. Mother Nature returns with a fury, destroying the camp and killing the infant, along with their hope for the future of the camp. The story is one of the newly found hope and the awe-inspiring miracle of what having hope can do even in the most hopeless place. It is also testament to the power of nature to both give and take away.